All right, thanks again for joining us. Today's session by Seth Davies, our managing partner, is Business Scorecard Best Practices for a Successful 2013. Thanks again for joining us, and go ahead and take it away, Seth.
Thanks, Connor. Let me add my welcome to everyone that has joined us today on this webinar on Business Scorecard Best Practices. One of the things that my firm does is we are asked to come in, do two things. One, evaluate scorecards that have been built by an organization, or two, provide recommendations, feedback on how to improve the scorecards. And many times what I see in an organization is I see lacking a system or a process around scorecards. And what will happen is they'll say, you know, we built these scorecards 6 months ago, but it just kind of atrophied and died. And the reason being is because there is not a process within the organization to drive that scorecard to be the focal point of the business, to be the way that we manage the business. And the scorecard will do several things for you. One, it'll help answer the question for you, are we winning or are we losing? Do we have the proper behaviors in place to influence our business metrics in a positive manner so that the business can grow, that we can reduce our costs, we can increase our quality, can increase our productivity? Another thing a scorecard will do is it will identify areas of opportunity in the business that need assistance. So you can look at it and see, where do we need to put our energy, our resources within this organization? What are the areas that, quote unquote, aren't feeling very well? We've got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, and I'll use a football analogy for you. You know, Monday morning you can get up and you can look in the newspaper, you can look on the internet, and you'll see two numbers. You'll see the final score, and either the Baltimore Ravens or the San Francisco 49ers will have won based on who's got the higher number of points. But what you really will need to do is you'll need to look at what's called the box score, the scorecard of the game, and look at how many turnovers did the team have, how many yards did they gain, how many times did they miss a field goal, how many first downs. That's the scorecard of the game. That really tells you where the game was won or lost. And that's what the scorecard will do for you within your organization, is provide the answers around, are we winning or losing, what do we need to do differently. Throughout this webinar, I'm going to talk about some foundational elements of process-based leadership. There's 4 foundational elements of process-based leadership. I'm going to touch on 3 of them during our time together. And also I want you to be thinking about in your mind about a scorecard seminar we have coming up in May, which is going to include a private behind-the-scenes benchmarking visit to Rockline. Rockline is a company we started working with about 16 months ago, and since those scorecards have been put in place, they have a 20% increase in what they call operational effectiveness, which is a roll-up of metrics from quality, from productivity, from cost. They have seen great dividends because their employees are connected to the business. So at the end, when we have our exit survey, there'll be the ability for you to check off to receive more information on that opportunity. Let's talk about, let me share with you what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about why scorecards are important. I've already touched on a couple key points. I'm going to share with you some best practices within the organization. Then at the end, I'm going to talk about how do you leverage your scorecard, how do you audit your scorecard, and how do you cascade that scorecard throughout your organization to drive the business forward. Connor had mentioned at the outset that we will be asking for your participation on our webinar today. And Connor, if you would launch our first poll of the day on the status of scorecards in the organizations.
Here you go, a very short and sweet one. We'll go about maybe 20 seconds or so and then share the results. And remember, if you have any specific questions, type those in as well. All right, about 5 more seconds here. Okay. And looks pretty similar to the session we did this morning, Seth. About 62% already do have some form of a scorecard, and the rest do not.
Okay. Well, for the 62% of you that have scorecards in place, here's something I want you to think about. And this is a huge misperception that I see in organizations. I will go into organizations, and they will say, we measure, we've got scorecards. But at the end of the day, what those organizations, what they're really doing is, all they've got in place is a thermometer. It's just telling them the temperature of the business. And they wonder why they're not getting better business results. They wonder why the scorecard process isn't really catching on, isn't really driving the business forward. And it's because of this. It's simply a thermometer. Your scorecards have got to be viewed as a thermostat. And if you think about the difference between the two, a thermometer, all it will do is tell you the temperature, but a thermostat allows you to make the adjustments. It tells you the temperature, but then you can make adjustments along the way to make the temperature warmer or colder with that. And if you're going to take the time to build scorecards, if you're going to take the money and the resources to build them, then you need to invest the time in talking about them as well. And what I mean talking about, and I'll expand on this more in our time together, but you got to sit down and look at your scorecards on a weekly basis and say, are we winning or losing? And if we're losing, what do we got to do differently as a result of that? So you got to take the time to invest on the back end, time to talk about what we need to do differently. Let me share with you 3 things that a scorecard will bring to your organization, 3 benefits. First, it will educate your workforce. It will provide a common business language. So when we talk about quality, we talk about lost time accidents, we talk about customer service, we're all speaking the same language. So if I'm over in the IT group and I'm asked to go to a meeting in the finance group and their scorecard is visually projected, I know what they're talking about. I don't need someone to tell me what's going on. So by having scorecards, we educate our workforce. We give that common business language throughout. The second thing a scorecard will do is it will facilitate meaningful meetings. And I want you to think about your organization. Think about, when's the last time you went to a meeting that truly advanced the business? And you walked out of there saying, that was a well-used hour of my time today because I really feel like we helped advance the business. Many times people go to meetings, they know it's going to be a bad meeting, it's a worthless waste of their time, but yet they go. Think about the only thing that you have in common with the people you work with. It's the business. So at the end of the day, we've got to have the scorecard as the focal point of our meeting. When we come together, we're there to talk about the business, and the scorecard is the mechanism to facilitate that meaningful discussion about what we need to do within the organization. And then the third thing the scorecard will do, it will motivate your workforce. Now, I was with a company last week, and the vice president, we were rolling out scorecards, and he had some words for the group, and he said something that resonated with me. He said, many of you hide in the chaos of the business. Many of you hide in the chaos in the business. And now the ability to hide is no longer going to be there because the scorecard is going to tell us how we're doing, and it better motivates you to do better. And if you think about it, if you're a member of a team and you come in Monday morning and you're looking at the scorecard for the entire organization, and then you're looking at other scorecards of other teams, and then your scorecard's got a lot of red on it because you're not doing what you need to do to help the business be successful, what's it going to do? It's going to motivate you to want to step up to help the organization achieve better business results. So those are the 3 things that the scorecard will do for you. It will educate, common business language, facilitate meaningful meetings, motivate employees so they can no longer hide in the chaos. Let's talk about some reasons to have scorecards. Well, obviously track business results so we can answer that question, are we winning or losing? Gives us that common business language, drives accountability at all levels. I'm not talking about accountability just at the senior level for results, because that's many times where the accountability of a scorecard resides, is at the senior leadership level. I'm talking about accountability at the senior leadership level, vice presidents, middle managers, all the way down to your associates, the folks on the front line. Everyone in the organization is accountable for the metric on their scorecard. Equip leaders to make informed, timely decisions, data-driven decisions, not decisions based on gut or instinct, but decisions based on true data of what needs to do. Establish priorities that link to corporate objectives. If you think about your organization, many of you have a strategy in place, a strategic plan of here over the next 2 years what we hope to do with our business, whether grow it, revenue, new product innovation. But many times what happens is there's not a way to cascade that strategy down and link it to the employees, but the scorecard becomes the tactical way that you implement it. So then what you're going to do is you're going to increase employee engagement because now employees are linked to the strategy. That scorecard is the tactical representation, and they see what they need to do on a day-to-day, week-to-week business to help the organization be successful. And what you're truly doing is you're connecting people to the business. You're creating that connectivity, that ownership, and that buy-in. Because many times at the end of the week, at the end of the month, employees will leave the organization or at the end leave and say, you know, I don't know if I helped advance the business, but by having the scorecard in place, they could look at it and say, did we do what we need to do to help the organization be successful, to help the business metrics and target? So that scorecard will connect people to the business. Some best practices. First, the leadership team's got to identify key business focus areas. 4 to 6 key business focus areas, not 12, small number. I was with a company 3 weeks ago. Safety, quality, and reliability. They bought a water bottling plant. Those are their 3 key focus areas, safety, quality, reliability. Let me give you some general areas around that: safety, quality, people, customer service, productivity. Basic, what I call key focus areas, are buckets of the business. Those have got to be identified. And then underneath each one of those, 2 to 3 SMART objectives. And SMART's an acronym. Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? And it is timely. That's how you develop SMART objectives, is by answering those questions. Then you need to decide, well, is this going to be a currency? Is it a percentage? Or is it a standard number? Establish your target threshold. Color coding, red or green. Are we winning or losing? And by the way, your target thresholds, they may change as your business fluctuates. You may have a busy season. You may have a slow season. So your target thresholds may change throughout that. Assign ownership. The owner is a critical component of the scorecard. The owner is the person that must be able to speak to the performance of that scorecard. So in a minute I'll show it to you, but if I have my name under the ownership category, when I walk into a meeting, I have to be able to articulate to my colleagues why that metric is red and what we should do about it. And then you need to look at it. Are metrics weekly? Are they monthly? Quarterly? I really like metrics to be on a weekly basis so that you can get out in front of issues or trends. And here it is, the 30th of January, and there are companies that are looking at their scorecard for the first time this month, looking at it today or tomorrow, and they're going to say, oh, we missed on quality, or we were over budget. Well, if you'd looked at your scorecard not on the 30th of January, but if you'd looked at it, say, on the 10th of January, you could have seen trends. You could have seen things were starting to get out of control, and you could have made adjustments then as opposed at the end of the month when it's too late. So here's a scorecard template that I and my firm utilize when working with companies. You'll see the first column, the key business focus areas. Again, 4 to 6. SMART objectives, 2 to 3 SMART objectives underneath each one. Target, well, you have to be above or below. The owner, who's the person that can speak to the performance of that metric? What I don't want is I don't want there to be a meeting going on, and Barry says, well, that's Zach's metric. I don't know where Zach is. Let me see if I can go find him, and I'll come back and bring an answer. Zach needs to be in that meeting. Zach needs to be able to speak to the performance of that metric. And then again, you'll see tracking frequency, visible indicator. I like color codes. I've worked with a company in the past. They use smiley faces or frowny faces. And then finally, comments. This scorecard is a living, breathing document, and so it becomes a history for us. And so if, for instance, 1 week you missed your shipping number, your shipping target, your on-time delivery, we'll put in there, we had a lot of bad weather across the country, snowstorm in Minnesota, tornadoes in Arkansas and Alabama. That's the reason we were late on our shipping, because our trucks couldn't get there in time. What I'm showing you here, folks, is an actual scorecard from a company I work with, and they utilize our business scorecard software called PBL Scorecard. It's a tool that we developed, and many of our client companies utilize it, have grown tired of trying to use Excel or homegrown system and need something a little more robust. But you'll see in gray, this organization, they measure quality, cost, productivity. You'll see the SMART objectives underneath each one of those. You'll see the target number, and then you'll see who's the owner of that metric. Is it a weekly metric, monthly metric? But look, what jumps out at me is the color coding. Within 5 to 7 seconds, I can answer the question, are we winning, are we losing? I know what type of meeting is it going to be. Is it going to be a short meeting because we have a lot of green, or is it going to be a longer meeting because we've got red on there that we need to address with that? So let's talk about, summarize some best practices. Leadership team, they create the key business focus areas, becomes a standard format throughout the organization. So if I go over to IT, here they've got the standard format. I go to HR, standard format. Customer service, call centers, they all have got the same scorecard template with the same 4 to 6 key focus areas. Next, no more than 15 goals per scorecard. You do not need to have 50 metrics on your scorecard, because what's going to happen is, 1, you're not going to be able to tell if you're winning or losing, and 2, you're going to have so much data on there you're not going to know what to do with it. Performance is color-coded. It's red or green. That scorecard you saw a short time ago, there was some yellow on it. I'm not a big fan of yellow because for me it doesn't tell me if I'm winning or losing. Yellow is that predefined danger zone that says, well, we're not red, we're not below target, but we're getting close. Visually projected. If you walked into that meeting and that scorecard was projected, you know what type of meeting it's going to be. We're going to have a long discussion about quality because there was a lot of red in the area of quality. So, and you saw the tone within 5 seconds. The tone of that meeting was set. Let me say a couple things also on no more than 15 goals per scorecard. That's typically at the top level of the organization, 15 goals on the scorecard. The lower you get in the organization, the fewer number of metrics. So when you get down to your associates down on the shop floor, you have 4 key focus areas. They may have a total of 5 or 6 metrics total on that scorecard. I'm going to pause here. Connor, if you would launch our second poll of the day, please.
All right, again, as you answer these poll questions, we thank you. We're about halfway through the session right now, so we've gotten a few questions. If you think of anything after you answer the poll question, please feel free to type in more specific questions for us as well. We'll go about 5 more seconds here. All right, and here you go, Seth. Looks like, well, about 74% say they have fewer than 10 or none at all.
Good. That's good to know right there. A couple more best practices, folks. Lower teams develop the tactical scorecard. So they take that template, and the teams come up with the metrics. Not a business analyst, not someone in accounting, but the teams that are closest to the business, they come up with the metrics that say, here's what we're going to measure under quality. Here's what we're going to measure under cost, safety, productivity. It creates that ownership, that buy-in, because think about it. If I walked down the hall to your team, to your department, I handed you your scorecard and said, good luck, it's not a true representation of your business because I don't know your business. I don't work in your area. I want you developing the metrics for your area, for your team. Team members utilize an action register. This is where we go from the thermostat to the thermometer application. Any metric that's read on the scorecard, there needs to be a corrective action. And it's not a corrective action that's developed by the leader or someone outside the team. The team develops the corrective action because they're the ones that are closest to the business. If you've been green on your scorecard for 90 days, change the target knowing you're going to go red for 2-3 weeks. What it's going to do is drive that continuous improvement. And by the way, let me go back to red. There's a belief out there that red is bad, that red is punitive. Absolutely not. Red is good. Red shows you the areas of opportunity. And there's a company that I've worked with in the past in Los Angeles. They view red as equal to green, just as good because, hey, here is where we can get better within our organization. So by putting things on by looking at our scorecard, talk about why we're red and put it on our action register, we're taking our scorecard from a thermometer to a thermostatic application with that. And then let's look at how this kind of cascades throughout. So you'll see there in the blue, that's the senior leadership team, whether it's the senior leadership team of the site or the senior leadership team of a business unit. They develop the template, the key business focus areas. Really, it's the strategy, the strategic goals, but then they cascade it down to the tactical, down to the lower levels so that the strategy is deployed in specific tactics. And then down at the lower levels, what I like to see at the lower levels, weekly basis, you're talking about your scorecard. And then as you go higher in the organization, maybe the middle managers, every 2 weeks you're looking at them. Senior leaders, that's when they, once a month is when all the scorecards have rolled up and reporting out. They have a monthly meeting looking at performance of the scorecards with that. Leveraging the scorecards. This right here, this slide is where 85% of company scorecards fall apart because they're lacking this process that I'm talking about, this thermometer to thermostat. Right here. You've got to have these 3 things in place. You can spend all the time in the world building scorecards, populating them, making them look pretty. But if you don't have these 3 systems in place that I'm about to share with you, you're wasting your time. First one is around communication and the need to talk about performance. The second one is around accountability and the need to hold people accountable for results. And I'm going to show you in a minute how you hold people accountable as a visible tactical representation of accountability. And the third is the performance comparison, the best practices of looking at what your peers are doing, whether in different parts of the building, different business units, different parts of the country, doing those performance comparisons around the business. So how these scorecards cascade, each team has a standard meeting to talk about performance. I believe organizations are experts at advertising, and what I mean by that is they believe that email, bulletin boards, newsletters, company internet, that's how they should communicate with their employees. What I'm talking about here is once a week for 30 minutes, teams come together, and the focal point of that meeting is the scorecard. And they talk about what are we doing and what do we need to do differently. And then you've got, in a minute I'll show you what we call pass up, pass down, where information is rolling down, it's rolling up, and it's rolling across the organization. This is a standard meeting agenda that I put into the client companies that I work with. It is designed to take about 30 minutes to run through this. The first thing is you look at your action register and you go through the items that are due that day, the critical assignments and tasks. The next one is a scorecard review. And if your meeting's 30 minutes in length, about 18 minutes of the meeting should be spent on the scorecard because, again, this is the focal point of the meeting. This is facilitating the meeting. This is what we have in common. Around the table is an opportunity for your employees to raise issues, concerns, such as, hey, when are we going to have IT come look at the system? When is maintenance going to come do some preventative maintenance? When is engineering going to bring in that new piece of equipment? Opportunity to raise issues and questions. Recognition, got to be on your agenda because we are very quick to run out and provide feedback when things aren't going so well. But when we've got green on our scorecard, let's provide recognition to our employees for a job well done. Pass up, pass down. Bulletized briefing. What's the key business information our employees need to know? We're going to cascade it down. But then also the pass up is the ability for them to pass key information up to us, such as recognition, such as around the table items, two-way, up and down. Second to last item is around the action register review. And we may have just come out of a meeting and there's 5 actions, 4 of which pertain to red items on our scorecard. We need to go around and set target dates and give verbal affirmation that, Dave, you're going to check with IT about this. Yes, Paul, you're going to check with finance about this. Yes. Make sure people understand what they need to do. And the third and final thing is the meeting audit. Think about where you talk about how bad your meeting is. You talk about it in the hallway. You talk about it at the coffee pot. Talk about how bad the meeting is in the meeting. Ask the simple question, did this meeting advance the business? Let's talk about the accountability piece. This is going to illustrate the thermometer to the thermostat. If you look at the scorecard, it's a simple thermometer. If you look at the scorecard and the action register together, here's our thermostat. We've got a metric that's red. Here's what we're doing about it. We got another metric that's red. We've talked about it. Here's what we're doing about it. So now we know who's doing what do we got to do, when's it going to get done. We've got the information locked and loaded so that now during the next week we can have the confidence that we're working towards turning a metric from red to green on that. Best practices. We have got to break down the walls. We've got to get out of the silos that we're in, and we've got to look at scorecards across our business unit, across our organization. And we've got to look at comparisons. And if we see, for instance, that, hey, in this instance right here, Dallas is knocking it out of the park when it comes to reducing defects. Well, Atlanta could certainly benefit. Seattle and Chicago could benefit as well from what they're doing. So pick the phone up. Schedule a conference call. You don't need to put together a special task force to understand what's going on with Atlanta. Have them interact with other locations within the organization. So we can look at best practices. We can talk about, hey, what are some actions that we've done that really didn't work? So share that key information so that we're all working towards improving the business within our organization. So let's talk about auditing the scorecards. Final piece here, folks. I'm a big proponent that every 90, 120, 150 days, you got to pull your scorecard out and you got to ask some of these questions. You know, what metrics are adding value? Which ones aren't? What are we missing? Are we able to impact that metric with a behavior change? In other words, if we do something differently, is that going to take that metric from red to green? Is the ownership on the right people? Has someone transferred out? Do we need to put it somewhere else? And then what is the cost of managing the scorecard versus the benefits derived from the scorecard? In my 20 years of doing this, I have never, ever come across a time when it was more cost-effective to scrap a scorecard than to keep one in place. The scorecard helps you manage that business. So a couple more things on auditing the scorecards I want to talk about. If your metric's been green, let's celebrate it. You know, pizza party, bring in a cake, what have you. But let's modify that target. Let's go red for the next 2 to 3 weeks, but it's going to help us drive continuous improvement by coming up with a corrective action plan around that. One more piece on this. If you've been red, one, is there a corrective action plan in place? And a company I've worked with in the past out in Kansas City, as long as there was a corrective action plan in place, leadership could not get involved with that team. Once 30 days had gone by and that team had failed to move the number with a corrective action plan, then the leadership could get involved. Also look at, what are some underlying causes of that with that metric? And then remember, red is not always bad. Red is good. Red is an area of opportunity. Connor, I'm going to pause you. If you would launch our third and final poll of the day, please.
And again, thanks for doing this and participating. We'll be getting to the Q&A here pretty soon as well. We'll go about 10 more seconds on this one and then share the results. All right. And let's see here, Seth. Number one answer is that people do not yet have a scorecard. Followed closely by those who do, saying that once a year is how often they take a look and make some changes.
All right. Well, I would encourage you folks to start looking at your scorecard every 90, 120 days, because on average, it takes 6 versions of a scorecard before you land on a meaningful one. And the scorecard that you build on January 2nd is probably going to be much different than the scorecard that you have on December the 2nd. Let me summarize here. Develop a scorecard. You've got that common business language. It's going to engage all levels of the organization because it cascades throughout, and you're putting in place meaningful targets. I want you to leverage your scorecards. I want you to have the action plans in place around that. I want you to share best practices and share performance. And then again, audit your scorecard. Are we measuring the right thing? What does that metric tell us? Is that metric helping us advance the business? Are we able to change behaviors and bring about a positive result on that? Connor, it looks like we've got about 2 minutes left. Any questions come in during our time together?
Oh, absolutely. Lots of great questions. We'll get to about 2, I think, and then answer the rest by phone or email. Here's a really good one. You were talking about assigning actions, and somebody asked, who decides what the action will be and who takes on the action? Is that up to the leader?
No, the owner, remember the owner column, the one that can report on why the performance of the metric, why it's red. The owner may say, here's why it's red, but collectively the team needs to talk about what do we need to do differently, because 9 times out of 10, all of them are impacting that. But then that action needs to be assigned to one person, not to multiple people, because if you put Kathy, Jamie, and Dave down, all 3 of them are going to think the other person's doing it. So the ownership of the action resides with one person with an agreed-upon target date, but collectively the team decides that action. They're closest to the business. The leaders in conferences and meetings in conference rooms on the phone, the leader's not quite sure what's going on. Ownership resides with the team to come up with the action. One more, please, Connor.
Okay. Yeah, you mentioned that it takes typically about 6 iterations before a scorecard is really meaningful. And somebody asked, how long should that take? Are we talking weeks, years?
Folks, I've seen anywhere from a scorecard taking from 4 months up to a year to really become a meaningful scorecard. And every scorecard is different, and I want you just to have the mindset that things are going to change, and along the way we've got to make adjustments. We've got to have those critical conversations around the scorecard of what is it telling us, what do we need to do, what do we need to measure differently. But have the mindset and be willing to make changes to the scorecard throughout the year. Folks, I appreciate your time. And remember, every Tuesday, 11 Eastern, we send out our weekly management tips. For February, we've had a lot of requests, employee engagement. How do I increase the engagement within my employees? So I'm going to talk about some engagement strategies. I mentioned our seminar and tour at Rockline coming up, our 2 websites there. If you're interested in learning more about our scorecard software, you can find that at pblscorecard.com. If you're interested in learning more about scorecard development, our other website, process-based-leadership.com. And stand by because Connor will launch our exit survey, and we look forward to getting your feedback. And I look forward to being with you next month on employee engagement. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
All right, it looks like Seth is taking off. I will hang out another minute or two. I see some questions still pouring in here. When you do leave and exit out of the webinar, the survey will pop up for you. So please, take about 30 to 60 seconds and help us out with that. I see some more questions coming through here, so I'll hang around for another minute or so and collect those. And again, sorry we can't get to every single question live, but we will reply by email at least or give you a call.